Right, you join me today on another horrible cold winter's day. There's snow showers, it's been pouring down all night, and air temperature's sort of 2 degrees. Now, if there's one method that is going to catch you some carp on a day like today, it's Dobbing bread. Now, Dobbing bread is as simple a tactic as it can get. Dob a bit of bread around your peg, don't feed a thing, and try and put it in front of a carp's nose. Couldn't be much simpler. But like every other method, there's some things that you've just got to get right. First of all, the first thing you need is to be sat where there actually is some carp to catch. You can fish as well as you want. If there's no carp there, then what chance have you got? So the first thing you need to do is sit yourself in an area where you're expecting to catch some fish. Now, for anyone who knows the Oaks, they'll see where I'm sat today, and that's peg 63 on Maple Lake. Now, it's a well-known peg at this time of the year, always holds some fish, so there's a good chance that I'm going to catch. Now, that's obviously where local venue knowledge helps. If you don't know the venue you're going to, there's always the option of sort of asking a fishery owner. Maybe there's an on-site tackle shop, try that. Or if not, social media is always a great place. Maybe message a venue regular, look for results, anything like that. Sit yourself in an area where you're going to catch some fish. Now, if you're in a match, obviously you're restricted to the peg you draw, but the tactics I employ today would be the same whether I was on a good peg or a bad peg. Obviously, it's just more difficult the worse the peg is. If you sat on a good peg, things become much easier. Now, when it comes to picking pegs, if you were picking one to look at, this has got everything that you would want. First of all, to my left-hand side round here, I've got the end of an island, lots of overhanging grass, plenty of cover, and I know from experience it's sort of 3.5 foot deep there, so loads of depth to catch the fish. Coming round off the point into this area, you've got a big expanse of open water. Now, on a snake lake, like this style of lake, a big expanse of open water like this is a magnet for fish. Plenty of room for them to move about to keep out of the way of people. In the middle of all that open water, you've got an aerator. Now again, aerator is sort of another feature in the open water what fish can hang around. Often you can see the fish knocking the aerator posts and things like that, giving themselves away that they're there. After that, when you come all the way around to my right, I've got this long corner, overhanging trees, overhanging brambles, a few reeds in the water. Again, 3.5 foot deep, 4 foot deep, plenty of cover for them. So it's actually got everything you want. It's got cover, it's got features, and it's got lots of open water, and it's got a good depth to hold the fish. So if you're going to go around and look at pegs, they're the type of things you want to be looking for. So I'm going to go on now, get set up. I'll run you through my rig that I'm going to use, which again is dead simple, and then I'll start fishing and I'll talk you through exactly what I'm going to do. One thing I just want to quickly talk about is plumbing up. Now, you hear of a lot of people when they're plumbing up before the start of the match, sort of dragging the plummet around the peg and trying to hit fish. Now, that does help you figure out where there is some fish in your peg. But for me, it's not something I like to do. The way I look at it is in winter, fish are going to happily be sat where they want to sit. And the only reason they've got to move is us, the angler. And if we're going to do something that'll spook them, they'll move out the peg. And for me, that dragging your plummet around the peg and hitting fish with it is just one more thing that can add to the fish moving out of your peg. But now, obviously, I still want to know how deep it is. I need to know where I'm fishing because I roughly like to start fishing sort of 3/4 depth. Rather than drag my plummet about my peg, what I like to do is just ship out and get a quick, rough idea of how deep it is. So I'm not going to leave my plummet in for long. Ship out, I'm going to lift it out of the water. I'm going to start off down this bank, so let's have a quick look. Lower my plummet in nice and gentle, straight down in a line. And I can see there, that's about 3 to 4 inches deeper than what I've got my rig set. Now for me, that'll do. It's only a rough guess. So I'll go around here again, go somewhere else I'm going to fish, lower my plummet down. And again, that's maybe 6 inches off the bottom. But it just gives me a rough idea of the depth. I'm not going to drop my plummet about everywhere along that bank and risk spooking fish. It might change depth by a few inches here and there, but I'm never going to be a million miles off knowing how deep it is. And as I'm going to be moving my float about quite regular anyway, coming a bit deeper, a bit shallower, it's not really mattering that much. if where I'm fishing is sort of 2 or 3 inches deeper than where I've plumbed up. It just gives me a rough idea of the depth. I know I'm not fishing over depth, and I know I'm not fishing sort of a long way off the bottom. So for me, that dragging the plummet about isn't something I want to do. Now, one thing I always think is, you can watch a video like this or read something in a magazine and try to copy it all word for word. And while that'll work, really you want to try and adapt everything to the way you fish yourself. So if dragging a plummet round your peg is something you like to do, and it's going to give you confidence that you're fishing in the right place, then by all means still do it. But for me, it's something I like to avoid because I just think it's one less thing that's going to spook the fish out of my peg. Right, this is ready to start the session. To start with, punch size, I'm going to fish a 6mm piece of bread. Now, I'm fishing to catch probably carp and F1s on here, and that size of bread is giving me a chance of catching both. If I was solely fishing for proper carp, I'd probably look at fishing a bigger punch, probably an 8mm, and if it was just F1s on the venue, probably slightly smaller, maybe a 5mm, perhaps even a 4 if the fishing's hard. But when you're looking for a mix, I think that 6mm, it's a nice size, giving you a chance of catching both carp and F1s. It's not too big for the F1s, stands out nicely for a carp. Now, when it comes to where to fish, I've started off down the edge, and obviously I've got a long bank to fish to. I can fish anywhere along it. It's decent depth, a bit of cover. And what I don't want to do is go too far along, because all that's doing is then pushing fish away from me. So I started at a nice length. I'm sort of just on the joint of my 11 and 13 metre section. Gives me more sections to either go along the bank to find fish, or hopefully I'll catch somewhere I'm fishing at the minute, and it'll give me sort of an area to follow them to. So start off somewhere you think you're going to get a bite. I'm far enough there from me to get away from any disturbance, but I'm not that far away that I can't go any further. And then what you're looking to do, obviously you want to put your bait right on a fish's nose. It fall past its nose ideally, and that's going to give you the best chance of catching it. So what I'm going to do is regularly just lift my rig out, not too far, just maybe 6, 8, 10 inch, and I'll just drop it back in, let that bread flutter down with no shot in that last little bit of the rig. It falls nice and slow and gives me a really good chance of it going past one. The other thing I'm going to do, every time I drop it in, I'll drop it in. Oh, I've just had a little indication then. I'll drop it in just slightly to the left or slightly to the right, slightly further, slightly shorter, not by a lot, just by sort of 3, 4, 5 inches. Just so it's not quite in the same place I've just lifted it from, and it's got a chance of going past one's nose. Now the other thing is, don't think because you're fishing towards the banking you've got to be right up against it. Sometimes you might catch tight to it, sometimes you can catch 4 or 5 foot off, sometimes you can just catch in the middle of nowhere in open water. So don't be worried about dropping your rig anywhere at all. There's a chance a fish could be sat anywhere, but obviously the closer to cover generally the better. there we go. It's the first fish of the day. And that is exactly what I'd have expected. Lifted my rig out, load it back down, and it's gone straight under. And you tend to find that most of them come as soon as your rig settles. I'd only had one other indication. You wouldn't have thought there's loads of fish there. But when you do put it on one's nose, they do find it very hard to not eat it with this bread. It's so soft, so big, so swelled up. And that nice soft elastic that I've got in, obviously it's got enough power to play the fish and do what I want, but that nice soft elastic, there was very, very little disturbance. So I would think if there's some more fish there, I'm probably not going to spook them. And as you can see, nice little carp, probably 2.5 pound, perfect bread fish, and there it is hooked right in the lip. So hopefully there'll be a few more for us to catch when we go back out. I'm going to go back in, I'll drop my rig back in exactly the same place as before, and hopefully there's a little pod of fish there. And what you often find with bread, or dobbing in general, is when you hook one, even if it's took you 10-15 minutes to hook one, there's a good chance of going in and catching your next one very, very quickly, almost as if they're shouldered up very tight, they're not really moving, they're a bit dormant, and when you hook one, it just disturbs them and gets them moving about a little bit. And because they're moving, you can often go back in and hook another one straight away. So let's go back out, straight into that same spot again. So I'm just past the joint of my sections again. Lay that rig in and just let it settle. And then same again, I'll just lift and drop, probably giving it sort of 30 to 40 seconds at a time before I lift it out, 8 or 10 inch, and just let it settle again. And I'll try and stick to this area. Now I've caught one, I'll try and stick to that area for maybe the next 40 minutes, half an hour. I don't want to be moving more than maybe half a section further, maybe a little bit shorter, slightly further out from the bank, slightly closer to the bank. But I know there's some fish in that area. I've had that little indication earlier on, and then I've caught one. So it's now just a case of almost teasing a fish onto the hook with that lifting and dropping, let it see it. Another thing you sometimes find with bread is, oh, there's another little indication. Now, so that's 2 signs I've had and only 1 proper bite. So the next thing I might look at now is just shallowing my rig up a little bit more. To me, that's a sign that the fish are maybe just bumping into my line and causing them little indications on my float. Something else you find with bread is where you're fishing with baits on the bottom and you get a liner, it can show up quite positive and your float goes under. With bread, they're normally much, much more gentle indications. And that is because your bait isn't as heavy. It's not acting like an anchor against the bottom of the lake, like maybe if you had a piece of corn or a pellet. So your rig's not quite as tight. You don't get them positive liners. So small indications that look like they could maybe be roach or something like that. Quite often the liners off carp and off F1s. And that's something to sort of keep in mind. If you think you're getting roach signs, try shallowing up, they might just be carp. The other thing is if you're getting a lot of sort of small indications of fish that you think might be roach and small nuisance fish, try a smaller punch. You'd be amazed how often putting a smaller punch on and you suddenly start catching. And it turns out they weren't small fish at all, they're just not really wanting to eat that bigger piece of bread. That's especially true with F1s. had half an hour or so dobbing about in that same area, within sort of a half section area along that bank, like I said. And I've caught 2 carp, so a nice start this time of the year. Can't complain, 2 carp after half an hour. But just decided it's time to have a little move. And like I spoke about, I'm going to move up to that area now. And I have seen that post knock, so I know that there is something there. And what I've always found is when you're fishing in this deeper water and dobbing, like it's 6 foot next to that, and when you've got a feature in that depth of water, you tend to find the fish sit a lot higher off the bottom. So rather than being sort of 3/4 depth, like I've spoke about fishing up to the island. Oh, I had an indication straight away then. Yeah, rather than fishing sort of 3/4 depth like I spoke about, I'm actually starting off up to that area at about 3 foot. Same sort of depth I'm fishing on my other line down the bank. I think the reason for that is because it's so deep, they don't want to go and sit next to the bottom. They're happy sat underneath that cover and just sitting there, sort of almost dormant. But if you can put your bait on one's nose, there's a chance of catching it. Now, I'll start off at that sort of 3 foot, and if I don't get any signs, I've got the option of going a bit deeper, which I will do. But to start with, I'd rather start off that bit shallower at the depth where I'd sort of expect more fish to be. And at least that way I'm not going to foul hook anything. And if I don't get any signs, I know I'm either not deep enough or there's nothing there, and I will go a bit deeper. Now, just because I'm saying I start off sort of 3/4 depth down the edge or up to that far bank, that's not to say that the fish won't sit shallower than that even there. And there's often days, especially when it's been frosty on a night and it's flat calm, and then the sun's come out and it's been very, very cold, and then the sun's warming them up a layers, and the fish can actually sit very, very shallow along that bank. And it wouldn't surprise me to catch them on days like that, sort of as shallow as 18 inches maybe, where the fish again are just sat towards that cover, but the sun bathing a bit in them warmer layers of the water. But definitely, even on a day like today when it's cold, in that deeper water, the fish do tend to sit much shallower in relation to the depth than what they do when you're fishing more to the cover, along the banking or up to an island. So just same again, I'm just going to keep lifting and dropping, try and put my bait past one's nose. I did have that indication as soon as I went in, so something there. So for the time being, I'm going to stick at this same depth. And there we go. I said I'd seen a couple of signs around that area. Post sort of knocking. It looks like a small fish, maybe a stocky or something, to be honest. But what is interesting is, unless that's a decent F1, what is interesting is, since I've fished there, the post's probably knocked 5 or 6 times. And that can only be because my pole's over the head, my rig's in the water. And like I spoke about earlier, the only thing to spook the fish is the angler. And just even having my rig in the water, I must have, look at that lovely F1 hooked in the top lip. Just having my rig in the water must have actually spooked the fish a little bit and got them moving about, because from having only seen that post knock once, it's knocked 5 or 6 times in the time I'm fishing there. And obviously something has caused them fish to start moving about. And the only thing that can have caused them to move about is my rig or my pole over the head, because that's the only thing that's changed. But it's nice to know that's another area now where I know there's a few fish. So I've had sort of half an hour down that edge, I've caught 2 carp, and I've got to that area and it's took me 5 minutes to get one. So I've got 2 areas now that I can exploit. And I've also got further along that bank to start moving as well. So things are actually looking really good. And like I spoke about earlier, this really is the perfect peg for this type of approach, because you've got all these different options. You've got that deeper water by the area, you've got the long banking, you've got the island. All things to sort of look out for during your peg choice. But that just shows as well that, I mean, it's getting on for 6 foot deep next to that area. I haven't actually plumbed it up today, but I do know from previous experience on the peg that it is deep there. And that fish is being caught at the same depth I've been fishing along the bank, so around 3 foot. And just shows how much higher off the bottom they do actually sit when they're in that deeper water next to a feature. And as I'm talking now, I've actually just seen a fish top. It didn't look a big fish, but I'm sure it must have been an F1 or a small carp, right along the bank into the corner. So again, it's just given me somewhere else where I'm now got in my mind, well, there's obviously a few fish there to have seen one top. So now I've got the post of the area where I've seen fish move, and now I've caught a fish. I've got this area along the bank, sort of on the joint of my 11 and 13 metre, where I've caught 2 fish, so I know there's some there. And with that one top and further into the corner, there's obviously some fish there, so there must be an odd fish right along that bank. So now my day's sort of becoming easy. You're never going to catch loads and loads of fish. The weather is absolutely atrocious, couldn't be much worse. But I know the areas on my peg where there's some fish, and now it's just a case of dobbing that bread around, lifting and dropping nice and regular, and maybe changing the size of my punch, moving my depth about a bit. Now, the big thing for changing depth, obviously there's obvious factors, and the obvious factors are, if I'm foul looking fish, I'm getting liners, I probably need to shallow up. If I'm getting no signs at all, then my options are either go deeper or move where I'm fishing. And it really is as simple as that. It's all about fish location. Once you've found the location of the fish, the area they're in, you just need the right size punch and to be fishing at the right depth, and the fishing becomes very, very easy. It then is a case of just lift and drop, and wait for a fish to intercept that bread as it falls past the nose. Right, just want to quickly show you the rig I'm using today. And as normal, it's actually quite simple, nothing really complicated. Just set up to do exactly the job I'm looking for. So first of all, my elastic. That's an 11 Dura slip. Now, I'm fishing to catch a bit of a mix of carp and F1s, and that's perfect. It's soft enough that I'm not going to pull out with any F1s, with plenty of backbone, plenty of strength in case I hook a carp. Moving on from that, main line, 0152 slick silk. Above my float here, I've got a length of about 18 or 20 inches, just to help keep my pole tip away from any fish in what's actually quite clear water. Small bulk there of 3 number 9s back shot, sort of 6 inches above my float, just to help keep control of that line. And float wise, now quite often if you watch my videos I say when I'm looking for stability in my rig I go for sort of a rounded body and a wire stem, and this float is a Malman Speedy. Rounded sort of body, wire stem, just helps keep my rig nice and stable when there's not any weight in my hook bait. I've only got a light hook bait, it's off the bottom, so it can drag through my peg quite unnaturally, and that style float just helps me keep it nice and still. The bristle is a 1.5mm plastic one, solid plastic, and I could use a hollow tip because the bites are very positive, so it's sort of not having anything to do with that. But with a solid tip, I can see my small shot down the line, register on it really clearly, and the weight of my bread as well. And that just means if I drop it in somewhere, my bait's hung up on something, it'll show up really clearly, my float will stick right out of the water, and I know I need to lift it out and lay it back in, get it away from wherever it's sat on. Underneath my float there, I've just got 5 number 10 shot, and then down the line, I've got 2 number 12s. The last one of them is sort of 10 inches from the hook, and that just allows my hook bait in that last little bit to fall lovely and naturally. When I'm lifting and dropping, it'll just sink and flutter down nice and slow, hopefully past a fish's nose. Hook length wise, I've gone for 0133 slick silk and a size 18 GPM. So a rig that's not sort of really heavy, but it's heavy enough if I hook a double big carp I'm going to get it out, but I'm not going to pull out with any of them smaller F1s. Right, decided to cut my session a bit short today. It's absolutely freezing. Keep getting snow showers and I can't wait to get home in the warm. But even though it's freezing cold, fishing's rock hard. I've managed to catch a few fish in the couple of hours I've been here. I think I've had 4 carp, 5 or 6 F1s. So on what's a rock hard day, a few bites, and just shows how effective that simple bread dobbing approach can be if you just get the basics of it right. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe. And if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. I'll see you again next time.